me.
I beg your pardon?
Feed me.
Tui, you opened your trap? Your thing? And you said...
Feed me, Krellborn. Feed me now.
I'll run down to the market and pick up some nice chopped sirloin.
Must be blood.
Tui, that's disgusting.
Must be fresh.
Little Shop of Horrors.
You're listening to Writing Roots, brought to you by Aspen House Publishing.
Welcome to Writing Roots. I'm Lee Holt.
And I'm Lee Esses. Today is Halloween. It's our final episode of the fantastic season that we've had. Another great October is in the books. And we can't not do vampires for this Halloween. And what else can we have for vampires except exsanguination?
There are many ways that a character can die of exsanguination in your books. By definition, exsanguination is when a person or animal loses about 40% of their blood. Enough to kill them.
Yeah, because veins and arteries are vacuums. It starts replacing the blood with air and other things start happening. We'll talk about that in a minute. A lot of the other things that we talked about this month, the ranged piercing and the hypothermia, these kinds of things, a lot of it comes down to the blood isn't flowing right. The oxygen isn't getting to the body. Fingertips are going numb because the blood isn't doing what it's supposed to do.
So when it comes to characters dying of blood loss, exsanguination, the most common kind you're going to run into is going to be your open wound bleeding. This could be a result of a cut, a stab, a gunshot wound.
Basically, something that puts the blood outside of the body when there should be blood inside the body. The next one is the one that made it our final episode for the month, and that is the slowly drained, the vampiric style, or like our opener in Little Shop of Horrors, he keeps losing blood, and he can't recover it fast enough. This often goes hand in hand with being anemic. If you've read Bram Stoker's Dracula, all of the symptoms of being anemic present, and that leads Van Helsing to believe that, oh, this must be a vampire.
The third way to lose blood is not necessarily by losing blood outside of your body, but it's internal bleeding. I will always think of that Brooklyn Nine-Nine episode where he's like, yeah, it was just internal bleeding. I mean, that's where the blood's supposed to be, right? But unfortunately, when the blood is not contained where it needs to be, it essentially acts as bleeding out because your veins, your vessels are no longer delivering the blood to where they actually need to go to keep your body functioning.
Now, if your book is set in a modern type setting where you've got medical characters talking to your character about internal bleeding, there's a different name for the different types of internal bleeding based on where it is and which organs it's affecting. Brain bleeds are especially the ones that you have to be aware of, especially in combination with our blunt force trauma. A lot of the symptoms of not thinking right and being confused about your environment, that can go hand in hand with the brain bleeds.
Now let's look at what actually kills people as a result of the loss of blood. First and foremost, losing blood means losing oxygen. When the blood can't navigate correctly through the body, it's no longer carrying that oxygen to the places it needs to be. If it is leaking out in the wrong place and too much of it goes away, then you die as a result because your organs start to shut down.
Now, if air is getting into the system where the blood should be, one of the things that you will get for like a gunshot wound that goes through the lung is you will often see frothing around the wound because of the blood interacting with the environment and with the air. You kind of get a whipped cream type effect where the movement is frothing the proteins that makes it harder to get to the inside and can be very gross and dangerous and fun for gunshot wounds.
The fastest way to kill someone if you want to get them to bleed out is by hitting an artery or a very important vein, such as the jugular vein. which is why vampires are often depicted as piercing the neck because it's an easy access, but can provide blood very quickly. Somebody can bleed out very quickly if you pierce that jugular. If you want a vampire to have a longer lasting victim, they can cause anemia in their victim by biting slower blood flow areas.
Some of those symptoms would be cold hands or feet, being fatigued or having headaches, perhaps having a migraine 2 days in a row, yellow skin.
And then when it comes to the internal bleeding, the signs that people are going to show is going to be weird bruising in areas. There's going to be pain. It's usually going to be a result of some sort of blunt force trauma. And the swelling is what really can cause a problem, particularly if the swelling is occurring around an important organ, such as the brain or the heart.
Some of that weird bruising can be in a place where the person wasn't injured initially because the sack of flesh that is our body holds in blood, but it doesn't always hold it where it's supposed to be, so it can slide around inside your body. On the wrong side of the arm or across part of your stomach or back if you sleep on your back. These kinds of things where it doesn't make sense for there to be a bruise, but it's like this bright stripe. And of course, if you have internal bleeding because of a puncture wound around the stomach area and blood going into the stomach, you'll get coffee grounds in your vomit as you're throwing up because the blood is coagulating and it looks funny. So that's something else that could happen to your character.
As for the kind of person who would use exsanguination as a way to kill someone, you are likely going to be dealing with somebody who is fairly sadistic if that is their goal in the process, is to make somebody bleed out. But most likely it's going to fall under one of the other categories we've talked about this month, such as the ranged piercing gunshot wounds. Like, that's more often to kill somebody as a result of bleeding out than actually damaging an important organ.
If your bad guy is intentionally damaging these organs, and that's part of their MO as a serial killer, there is a good chance there is some sort of religious or theological motivation behind their killings. Blood is very often connected with life and is considered life-giving in a lot of different folklores and religions around the world, so that is definitely something to consider about your killer.
Now, if we look back in history, especially taking into consider the connection to folklore and theology, we can see exsanguination often as a way to sacrifice. In Judeo-Christian beliefs, blood of the innocent was often traded to redeem the guilty. Blood was usually shed in other forms of sacrifice to gods in order to seek particular blessings from them.
In Viking culture, there is a little bit of documentation of what was called the blood eagle. This was depicted in Old Norse poetry, but it was about times that were long prior to that. Not a lot of writing happening there, so we don't know if it was just fantasized or if it actually did happen. But this blood eagle was a ritual killing where the person being killed was often royalty, and they sacrificed themselves to thank the gods for a certain kind of victory or answering their prayers, that kind of thing. What they would do is they would place the person that they are killing face down and then break some ribs away from the spine while the person is still alive and pull the lungs out through the broken ribs and throw them above the shoulders to look like wings. That's where the blood eagle comes from. Very morbid and a very interesting way to sacrifice someone through blood loss is the ultimate death.
Similar to that, where the actual occurrence is up to debate, is Countess Elizabeth Bathory of the 1560s in Hungary, modern-day Slovakia. Now kind of believed to have been propaganda from rivals who were not happy to have a woman in such power. But it was believed that she was a serial killer said to have bathed in the blood of virgins with victims up to about 650 people that she killed, all believed to have been fairly young women. And she was trying to achieve eternal youth by bathing in their blood. Obviously, the number 650 seems to be a lot. Like, how could people not notice that many people going and disappearing? The gentry at the time would often send their young female scions to the Countess to learn the ways of the court, which is part of where she's said to have gotten so many of her victims. But again, it's all kind of up for debate because she was a powerful woman in the 1560s.
And then the last thing we're going to mention is, of course, the incident in New York, Skid Row, in the 1980s when the meteor crashed and a plant bloomed there. The plant fed off of their caretaker's blood, nearly draining them to death. And of course, I am joking and talking about Little Shop of Horrors, which was our opener. You will find a lot of feeding off of blood throughout a lot of stories out there. There is a very intimate connection by drinking someone else's blood or having them drink yours. And if it's not vampires, it could be deities of some kind that your characters are trying to create a bond with by sacrificing blood in one way or another. So if you're looking to get that little extra step of weirdness for your killer, Exsanguination is something to consider for sure. We don't recommend trying it, but instead,
Write selfishly.
If you have a question or comment for our hosts or a topic you'd like us to cover, send us an email at writingroots@aspenhousepublishing.com or find us on Facebook by searching for Aspen House Publishing.